And welcome to Saxo's webinar, ESG, How to Make a Difference with Your Investments. My name is Melody, and I am Head of Evergreen Content at Saxo, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm joined by Ida Johannesen and Tom Boitaud. Ida is Head of Commercial ESG at Saxo. She's responsible for the ESG offering, ESG tools and features on the platforms, ESG content, and marketing efforts. Based in Dublin for 3 years, Tom has been part of the investment specialist team covering European equities at Amundi Asset Management. Tom is responsible for the entire suite of active European strategies, ESG equity income, as well as Amundi's active global ESG strategies. On today's webinar, we'll cover the case for ESG, identifying sustainable investments on Saxo's platforms, Amundi's philosophy on the process for building a sustainable fund. And we will also set aside 15 minutes at the end for questions, so feel free to type in your questions in the chat at any time. I also want to mention that at the end, you'll see a slide with a QR code to scan, which is a short survey we'd really love you to complete so we can keep improving our webinars. Now, before we get started, here is some important information we need you to read. So I think Ida is going to put up a slide. Ida, are you there? I think some people are having technical difficulties. There we go. So I'm going to read this because I'm required to, so bear with me. Information presented herein is for educational and informational purposes only and is not a recommendation or an offer or solicitation to buy or sell any securities. Investing in financial products involves risks, including risk of loss. As a general rule, you should only invest in financial products if you understand the risks associated with them. And also remember, past performance is no guarantee of future results. Before investing, you should consider your investment objectives, time horizon, and risk appetite. Next slide, please, Ida. All right. So I think Tom is still having some technical difficulties, but we will get started with Ida. It's so nice to have you today, and also you, Tom, if you can hear me. The title of the webinar, as everyone who's signed up for probably knows, but I'll just remind you, is ESG, How to Make a Difference with Your Investments. So, there's Tom. Hi, Tom.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome. So we're just getting started with my questions for you two. And also, attendees, please remember you can always enter any questions you may have for the end into the chat. So let's get started with Ida. What does ESG, How to Make a Difference with Your Investments, mean? How can an investor make a difference with his or her investments? Do you mind getting started with us, Ida?
Hi, Melody. Thank you for the introduction. Definitely. What does it mean to make a difference with your investments? I think it is important to remember that all our investments make a difference. Sometimes it's a positive one, sometimes it is a negative one. The companies that we invest in do affect the environment and societies around them. And so the question really is, do you care? If you don't care, I'm not exactly sure why you joined this webinar, but I hope you stay till the end because you might actually learn something. And if you do care, then you are in the right spot because we are going to be talking about how to make a difference and how to gain exposures to companies that do the right thing. For an investor, making a difference starts with intentionality. And so it's really about choosing companies that consider ESG, choosing companies that manage their ESG risk well. Let me just share my screen, I think here. So this is what making a difference means. It's about being intentional. So choosing the right companies, companies that have a positive impact on society and or the environment, or at a minimum, choosing not to invest in companies that harm society and or the environment. Secondly, making a difference also means engaging with companies when you own stocks of a companies, you should vote your shares through proxy voting. And this simply means that when companies submit resolutions or proposals at annual meetings, that you vote for those resolutions that align with your values, and you vote against the others that do not align with your values. For example, I own shares of Tesla, and for the past few years, I've been voting my shares. Last year, I voted against a resolution to re-elect Elon Musk's brothers to the board of directors. I simply thought that this guy was not independent at all. This year, I voted against a resolution for Elon Musk remuneration. I think he's a fantastic entrepreneur and he should make a ton of money, but that number was just excessive, in my opinion. And this year, again, I voted for a shareholders resolution to have more ESG disclosures. So definitely use your voice and vote for the changes you want to see. And that is how you make a difference.
That's so interesting. So you mentioned choosing to invest in companies that do the right thing. So what does a company that does the right thing do actually? What does that mean? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, companies that do the right thing can do a number of things. For example, they can choose to manage their carbon footprint by decreasing their emissions. It's also about treating their employees well, treating their clients well by offering safe products, respecting the communities around them, and last but not least, complying with rules and regulations and operating in an ethical manner.
All right. Well, Tom, I want to give you a question. Welcome. We're so happy you're here today. And I wanted to ask you if you could explain to our attendees what exactly ESG is, in case there's anybody here today that just doesn't know.
Sure. So thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here and be part of this webinar. Thanks to everyone for taking the time. So let's start by actually answering the question, what is ESG? So ESG stands for three pillars of environmental, social, and governance. Basically, ESG investing refer to how company will perform in terms of their responsibility investments. And this is something that Amundi has done pretty well, integrating responsible investment, because Amundi, as of today, manage around 900 of billion in the responsible investment spectrum. We are also leveraging on what we call the ESG data providers. So the ESG data providers will provide us some rating, some score, so some analysis that we will use to make our own ESG rating. This ESG rating will be between companies that are having a good ESG profiles rated A, and to the worst company, the worst ESG company will be rated basically G. I think the thing that is important as well is to look at the criteria, what we call the key performance indicators that a company will present. So the key performance indicators, you have actually one example of each on the slides, are the criteria that will be relevant for a sector or a business model that we need to look at in order to improve them over time. I will maybe also argue a point that actually Ida talked about, the proxy voting. Voting is fundamental. So ESG investing is also a matter of voting and engagement. 2,531 voting, that's the amount actually of voting that Amundi has been doing in 2023. That's something that is very important to turn around a business, to challenge and to support business in the improvement of the ESG side. finally, I would say, I will summarize a bit this question in a nutshell. I think ESG investing is a way of achieving performance within a sustainable, impactful, and efficient framework.
All right, thank you. Ida, I'm going to go back to you. I wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit about, is it possible to both do good and make good money? Is there a trade-off between ESG and performance? Because a lot of people say there is. So could you clarify your thoughts on that? Ida, you're muted right now.
Oh, so sorry. Here I am. I'm sharing my screen, and the answer to the question is absolutely yes. It is possible both to do good while making money. So I'm sharing my screen, and I'm gonna go over what is known as the spectrum of investing. And on this graph here, on the far left, we have what is known as traditional investments. And here, an investor has a financial goal, which is target competitive risk-adjusted return. The investor in this category doesn't care whether his or her investments have a positive impact on society or the environment. The only consideration is financial. As you move to the center, what is known as responsible investments or ESG investments, you can see that there's different type of strategies with different return expectations. Negative screening is when an investor excludes for his investment universe or portfolio companies or sectors that are not aligned with his or her values. ESG integration is when one incorporates or integrates ESG factors as part of traditional fundamental analysis. And then impact is when an investor seeks to only invest in companies that have a positive impact on society or the environment. We can see here that the financial goal for most of those ESG strategies, except for impact first, is to seek a competitive risk-adjusted return, the same as for traditional investments. The only difference is that for those responsible strategies, in addition to a competitive risk-adjusted return, they do not want to invest in companies that harm society or the environment. They want to invest in companies that benefit all stakeholders, not just the shareholders. And for impact investing, they even want only to invest in companies that contribute solutions to the environment. And so the answer is yes, absolutely. You can make money while doing good. And when I walk you through the platform, you would actually see examples of companies and funds that do the right thing and also have very good returns.
Okay, interesting. So, Tom, I wanted to give it to you next. The question: what about this belief that ESG stocks tend to underperform? Where is it coming from, and is it true?
Thanks for the question. That's an interesting question. So I think we need to kind of take a step back on on what happened over the recent years. So when you look at, for example, last year we had like high inflation. We are still facing today and for a few years now geopolitical tensions that are getting more intense. So I think on the short kind of like term trend, we have seen that the ESG momentum has been a bit impacted by all of this event and macro context. But I will argue here maybe that when you think about ESG, you might think about a wind farm company. And of course, just to go back on the first thing I said, if you had like inflation, high interest rates, this type of company that needs to invest a lot of money in sustainable energy because this has a huge cost, they will need to pay more interest. So it means that will cost more for these companies. But if we look at the chart, you can see that ESG stock tend to outperform the non-ESG stock over the long term. And here it's a representation of actually 10 years. We took two benchmarks here, just for the explanation. We took the MSCI World, so the traditional benchmark, and the MSCI World SRI, which is a benchmark whereby we select the around 400 stock in the MSCI World that present the highest ESG score / rating. But I think I will also argue that I talk about this long-term trend in ESG, and the world is aware, the government, the nations is aware, and there is some support measure that have been taken by few governments to support this trend. And here you can think about, and I'm sure you already heard about this, but the Euro Green Deal in Europe, which will be $1 trillion of investment for the transition to net zero. We can think about the Inflation Reduction Act in the US. You can think about the COP26 that gather 120 states together to talk about the transition and what are the measures that we need to take in the future. So there is a lot of support coming from also government and states. And finally, I would say that it's important for investors to consider ESG and fundamental of the company as two sides of the same coin, because we know that ESG can have an impact on fundamental and so on.
All right, great. And Ida, can you tell us how to find these ESG investments? What are the resources available to investors? Ida, you're muted again. You're muted again.
Bummer, I cannot make the same mistake again and again. Okay, so I was saying, yes, we do have a number of resources available on Saxo's platform. And here I'm going to share another screen now with the platform to do a walkthrough. Just give me a second. Windows, it's this one. Okay, I hope you can see my screen. So this is Saxo Investor. When you enter Saxo Investor, I'm going to start with funds. For funds, we have ESG risk ratings available on the platform, and it is provided by Morningstar. So if you stick on the what am I doing? Sorry. Can you still see my screen? Can you still see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So this is a platform, and if there's any problem, please, Melody, just let me know, because I'm moving to another page. So this is the Saxo's platform, and I went to the stocks page. So for example, I'm going to click on Apple here. And to find the ESG risk ratings, you need to go to the Sustainability tab. And then here we can see that the ESG risk score for Apple is 17, which corresponds to an ESG risk category of low. Low and negligible are the top ESG risk ratings for companies, because we're talking here about risk and you want those numbers to be as low as possible. Medium is average, and high and severe are above average. So the first step here is definitely to look at the sustainability and ESG risk rating for a company. But you should not stop there. Before making an investment, you should look at other things such as the fundamentals of a company. So looking at the revenue of a company, is it increasing over the years or not? Looking at net income, the assets of a company also, are those increasing or not, and definitely the debt, but also measures of profitability like the return on equity, for example. In addition to the fundamentals, you could look at the analysis page. So here you have recommendations from professional analysts. And in this case, for example, we have 21 analysts that recommend to buy, 11 to overweight, and only 2 to sell out of 49. So in addition to the sustainability rating, looking at the fundamentals, you could also look at a company's sustainability report. Nowadays, most companies, large companies, put out a sustainability report that includes information about their ESG strategy and practices, and all that can help you actually better understand how the ESG risk rating was assessed or determined. For funds, it is a similar thing that you can do. If you go to, no, one more thing before we go to funds. For stocks, you can also do what we call screening. So here, instead of looking at Apple only, you go to explore all stocks and you use the filtering tool. So here, for example, you have the ability to select the ESG risk category. Let's say I'm only interested in negligible and low risk. So I click on those. You might also be interested, for example, in sector. For example, I'm looking for a stock in healthcare. So I click here. So I went from 250 plus to 175 companies. Let's say I want to filter this even more by region, and I only want to look at companies in the US. So I'll go here, and now I have a list of 73 names. So I click on that, and this is what I get. You can sort by performances. So you see all those companies in this list are only negligible and low risk ESG companies. You have the performance here. There's a market cap if that's what you want. If you're looking for large companies only, you can sort by the market cap. So you have the largest caps at the top. And something else that you can do, you can look at, for example, something that I do, I look at the price changes over a longer period. You could select 3 or 5 years. For funds, it's a similar exercise. Here, for both ETFs and mutual funds, we have sustainability ratings from Morningstar. So let's say I click on any name here. I'm just going to click on Amundi's. This one has a sustainability rating of 3 globes, which is average. If you want to filter, you would do the same. You go back to the previous page. And here you go to explore all ETFs. So the same, you go to the filter and you enter the criteria that matter to you. For me, it's sustainability rating. I'm only interested in companies that have 4 or 5 globes of sustainability ratings. I'll also look at the Morningstar rating. 4 and 5 stars only are those I'm interested in. Morningstar ratings are a measure of a company's risk-adjusted performance. So that's something that I look out for. You might look for a category if that's what you're looking for, but something that I do is also look at performances. I want something with positive performances, for example. So I go for minimum, I would say 10. So I have 250 plus names. And if you want to filter this even more, you can add other criteria there. Asset classes, for example. There's a ton of stuff here. Don't be distracted and confused. I know. Look for what you're looking for. So I'm looking at diversified and equity portfolios, or maybe only equities. And this is a list that I get. Usually with funds, what I like to do is to look at not only the short-term performance of 1 year. If I sort like this, these are all the funds with at least 4 sustainability rating globes. These are the one I'm interested in. So I can see the performances here over 1 year, but then I'd also like to look at performances over a longer time horizon. So for example, 5 years. And here you can see how those funds have performed both over 1 year and over 5 years. And that is all for the platform walkthrough. These are the resources that we have available on the platform.
All right, great. Thank you, Ida. Tom, I wanted to talk to you next because you are an investment specialist at Amundi, which is the largest asset manager in Europe with a very uniquely large ESG offering. So can you talk to us about what is a good ESG fund and how is such a fund built?
Sure, that's actually a very good question, a question that we've been asked by clients a few times. I will answer in two ways. First of all, I think what is like a good ESG fund is a fund that will integrate ESG in a manner that he will take into account in his framework of investments the cost of ESG. So remember earlier on we talked about the KPI, the key performance indicators, these famous criteria that we think are relevant for a business. I just wanted to give you here a quick example. In terms of the criteria, if you look at an oil company, for example, the environmental aspect maybe will be more relevant than the other criteria. You will give more importance on this criteria because you know that it's company that can pollute more than if you take a bank or other type of company. Is this company that will like have an impact on biodiversity? And so this is the type of criteria we need to look at and really focus on in terms of the ESG aspect of the company. If you take another example, a bank, you will maybe more look at the governance, the remuneration within the employees, also the equality, gender, and so on and so forth. So that's the way we look at the criteria. At Amundi Equities, we have decided to take this into account in our valuation framework. So it means that when we invest in a company, before investing, we look at the relevance of these 2 or 3 relevant criteria, and we're going to incorporate this in the final target price that we think is relevant. The way we do it is to apply a bonus or a penalty on the stock price, the target price, to make sure that we take into account what we just talked about, the ESG, the relevance of this ESG criteria. And I think this is something that is fundamental because we perfectly know that, for example, a company that hasn't invested in the transition yet will need to do it at some point, and this will be a cost in the future. So we try to have kind of a forward-looking view on ESG, which make it, I guess, worth to invest. Secondly, the diversifications. I think investors over time have been pretty disappointed about ESG funds that were really concentrated in the growthy area of the market. We talk about the example of a wind farm. I think when you think about ESG, you think only about this, but bear in mind that everyone has a role to play in terms of ESG integration, ESG improvements, and also if you talk about transitions. And this goes to my the 3 strategies that I wanted to talk to you about, because you have different ways to invest in ESG. The first one is a strategy called global ecology, which is basically a strategy that will bring an holistic view on ESG by investing in 10 different themes that we play a role in the improvement of responsible investment. If you look on the top left, you have, for example, the sustainability mobility sector. Here you can think about the electric car. And if you look also at the water space, you can think about utilities company. So this is a portfolio that is well diversified and offer you a way to play different type of thematic and also different mix the different style that we know, growth, value, more defensive, more cyclicals. The other strategy that I wanted to showcase to you, it's again, it depends on your needs and your objective. It's called the ESG improver strategy. So remember earlier, we talked about the key performance indicators, these criteria that are relevant for the business. So if we look at the next slide, you can see that we look basically at the early stage of a company in terms of ESG and try to invest in order to have an improvement of this criteria trend. The idea is really to invest for the future and invest on, as I said, an improvement of these criteria. And you have different type of business model. You have the ESG winners, companies that are already mature, that already arrive at a certain level of ESG and ESG, which are so already the winner of today. And you have the improvers and the future improvers, the one that are on the right path to improve the relevant criteria, but there's still some ground to gain. Finally, if you're more interested in transitions, we have launched more recently, in 2023 actually, a strategy which has an objective of carbon emissions reductions. This, just as a reminder, what is the goal of net zero? The goal of net zero is to balance the carbon emissions within the one that we remove from the atmosphere to arrive at this famous net zero. And here you have a strategy that is well diversified in three types of business model: climate champions, the winner of today, the company that have very low carbon emissions, but also the more high intensive industry, which are the ESG, what we call the ESG committee, that have a good ESG rating, but still has a lot to prove in terms of carbon emission reductions. And you will also find in because there is three business model, the climate enabler, which are company that present technology that will support and help other company in their transitions. You can think about here a company that is producing basically a cable which will connect wind farm together. That's something that we take into account and we invest in this strategy. And the end goal of this last strategy is first to deliver, of course, performance, because that's the reason why we invest in a fund, but also to commit to an annual carbon reduction by 7% per year following the Paris Aligned Agreement.
Thank you, Tom. So I wanted to ask both of you the next question, which is, can you share, in your opinion, what are some of the world's biggest ESG challenges right now? Ida, why don't we start with you? You're muted. You're muted.
Okay,
there you go.
I'm learning, Melody. I guess everybody always talks about climate change, but for me, income inequalities are actually one of the biggest challenges that we face, because income inequalities are an obstacle to long-term growth. Income inequalities happen when wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few. And so this means that there is less demand from the general population. countries with growing income inequalities also tend to invest or spend less in things like healthcare and education, which ultimately hurt long-term growth. What is it that companies can do? Well, companies can, first of all, pay a living wage to their employees locally, but also ensure that their suppliers pay a living wage, even in the developing world. They cannot just close their eyes to what happens in their supply chain if it happens far away. So paying a living wage is key. Another thing that companies can do is to pay their fair share of taxes. Some companies optimize their tax strategies so much that they end up paying very little. It might be legal, but it's certainly not ethical, because by doing so, governments are not able to collect all the money that they need for much needed services locally. So for me, income inequality is a big challenge.
All right, Tom, what say you?
Yeah, I would argue on actually what Ida mentioned at the start. I think one also one of the biggest concern that we have today is the global warming situation. Everyone has heard about this. It's in the press. It's everywhere. And here, if you think about it, the reason why it's a big challenge, if you only look at the Paris Align Agreement, we need by 2030 to reduce our carbon emissions in Europe by 40% and reach this famous net zero target by 2050. So this is a big challenge. And this is a challenge that will require three things: investment, time, because you cannot change a company, a business model from a day to another, and also commitment from company, which as asset manager in general, we are aiming for, we are supporting and challenging company on this side in order to meet these targets. So I think for me, this is one of the biggest challenge we are facing today.
All right, and the last question before we get to the Q&As from our attendees, I wanted to see if you both could talk to us about, in your opinion, is ESG a fad? Is it still going to be relevant in 10 to 20 years? What do you think? Tom, let's start with you.
That's a good question. I would argue that it's a bit linked with the previous one in a way, because as I mentioned before, I think, as I said, this transition will require time. It will require also investment and commitment from company. But more importantly, I think ESG has evolved over time. We've seen that company needs to disclose more and more metrics on the ESG side, and they have been asked to do it. We've seen also the label that evolve, the famous ESG label that evolve, that are becoming more strict. And maybe if you think about the ESG improver strategy that I was talking about, we can still say today that we are at the early stage of ESG, if I may, because we are still looking at company to improve on a certain pillar, on certain criteria. And this, again, will require time. It's a long-term trend to invest and play with. Maybe the latest thing I want to mention about this question is also the innovation. I think asset manager in general has been following this trend, the challenge that we're facing in the world, by innovating and trying to deliver to client, to offer to client solution that will meet the challenge that we are facing every day. If you think about the three strategies I mentioned, global ecology is a clear strategy that has been launched more than 20 years ago, but the Improvers Funds has been launched in 2021 and the net zero in April 2023. So with the over time, we are trying to improve, trying to create solutions that will answer the needs of today and tomorrow.
What about you, Edith? What do you think?
One last time.
There you go.
Well, unlike Tom, I would say that I actually do not know where this is going. I don't believe that it is a fad, but at the same time, nobody has a crystal ball, so we don't know where we're going to go with this. What I can say is that we've seen a growing interest for ESG, and more people are concerned about those issues. So for those reasons, I believe it's going to be here for a little while longer. How long exactly, I don't know.
All right. I guess we'll get to the questions. We've gotten a few from attendees, so I'm not sure, Tom and Ida, how you want to divide this, but I guess we'll start with the first one is from Sylvester. Thank you. It says, what is the best way to find highly rated ESG stocks to swing trade?
I think I can start with that.
Okay.
When I did the platform walkthrough, I showed how to find those highly rated stocks on Saxo's platform, at least. So by going to the sustainability tab and looking at the ESG risk ratings for stocks. And here the focus, if you are interested in ESG, would be to look for companies with negligible and low ESG risk ratings.
All right. Alex wanted to know, is there an option in the app to enable push notifications for when voting is due for the companies in my portfolio?
I am not exactly sure. I can get back to you, Alex. I'll double check with our cloud service desk, and then we'll get back to you by email.
All right. Another question, can you share concrete steps for building an ESG portfolio? Who would like to take that one? Tom?
So maybe I can take that one.
Okay, go for it.
So to build an ESG portfolio, basically, first of all, you need to have a strong investment process in place. I think I will maybe comment only on the way we're doing it at Amundi Equities. We are looking at this famous ESG rating. So when you take the ESG rating, we, for example, within our portfolio, we apply the Amundi ESG policy. And first of all, when you build a portfolio, exclude the company that are rated G. That's part of the Amundi ESG policy. And secondly, that's what I mentioned a bit earlier in the call. The way you build an ESG portfolio, and it depends on the strategy, is first to incorporate in the valuation of each company that you want to invest in your portfolio, the cost of ESG. And the first step, again, depending on the strategy, you will strengthen your ESG process by maybe looking at at the improvement of the criteria that we talk with the ESG improvers, and so on and so forth. If you take if I take the example of the net zero strategy, the way we do it, it's also in this specific strategy, is to take into account the cost of carbon in the future that company will face, and the actual cost of carbon, the carbon emissions that the company is producing at the moment. So to summarize, basically, on one side, you need to have a strong investment process, and depending on you, and start by excluding the company that will never improve in terms of ESG. And on the other side is take into account in your investments this ESG aspect.
All right. Thank you,
If I could
Tom.
just
Yes,
if I could
please.
just add to Tom's answer,
Please do.
let's just say for the regular Joe or Jane investor at Saxo, if you have a portfolio and you want to transition that portfolio into more sustainable options, again, a way to do that could be to replace some of the names in your portfolio with other names in the same industry or sectors, but with better ESG credentials. So by using the screener, you could have a list of companies in a specific sector. And then from that list, you could select a name, not only based on the ESG risk rating. Of course, that rating should be better than the one you seek to replace, but by also looking at the fundamentals of that company. You can do it slowly, you could do it rather fast, but of course you need to take into account the tax implications of selling a profitable position. Instead of stocks, you could also use funds, for example.
All right. Another question is, how can I make sure that a company I'm investing in is not greenwashing? Can you talk a little bit about that? Tom, let's go with you.
So that's a great question. Thanks for asking. So we do our best to avoid greenwashing. It's a huge topic actually. I think to prevent this type of situation, it goes back to what I said a bit earlier. It's to first exclude the company that you think will never improve in terms of ESG. That's maybe the first step of it. And the secondly is like when you look at a company and when you look at the fundamental of the business, you need to make sure that the fundamental is linked with the ESG side of the company. And by looking at this criteria that I mentioned a few times, you can see if the link between both makes sense and avoid company that tell you something and do actually have a situation of greenwashing. But also the engagement, the dialogue with company is very important. It's fundamental because by talking to company, by looking at the metrics, talking to company, you have a better understanding of the business model, and also you can have a better understanding of basically what they're aiming for, and so the objective and what is their main goal. So I think that's really important. Dialogue with company, and also looking at both fundamental and ESG on two sides.
Okay, Ida, do you want to chime in, or do you think he answered all of that?
I think he answered all of it. The only thing was when Tom was talking about having a dialogue with companies, most investors, especially retail investors, cannot really have a dialogue or enter into a dialogue with a company. So there, definitely the company's sustainability report is a valuable source of information. So when it comes to greenwashing, don't trust anyone. You have to do your own homework. Yes.
Okay. Okay, we have another question from Rick. This is a long one. So to clarify, the ESG ratings in Saxo come from Morningstar and Sustainalytics. Are these based on the risk to the company of ESG factors? Is the company likely to be impacted by climate change due to its location operations, as opposed to whether the company is having a negative impact on climate change? Ida, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take that one. The ESG rating that we have on the platform is indeed provided by Sustainalytics, and it is an assessment of a company's exposure to ESG risk and how well a company manages those risks. So it's not so much about whether the company is having a positive impact, but it's how well they manage the risk that they are exposed to. And so, of course, if a company has a high risk rating, it means that either they are exposed to something and or they don't manage that risk well. So they do have a negative impact on that specific factor.
All right, Tom, do you want to add your 2 cents?
I think that was no, that was pretty clear
Good.
from Ida.
Okay,
Yeah.
I thought so too. All right, another question. Someone mentioned sustainability reports as additional source of information, but are companies required to have a sustainability report? You guys can fight over that one. Who wants to answer it?
So maybe I can start, and Ida, if you want to add a bit on my answer, I would say here that yeah, it's something that is we require as of today, because when investors, when portfolio manager look at a company, they want to have the full picture, basically. So is it required legally? It's becoming required legally, but I would say for now it's important for a company to disclose the full picture, because if you want to invest in a company, you need to have both aspects. So I would say that's also maybe add on the fact that yeah, regulation and is pushing towards toward this, and this will be more and more the case. And companies like Amundi are also challenging the companies we are investing in, or the other one, to display more metrics, more information, to get really, as I said earlier, the full picture. So I think yes, it's required.
So the question, Melody, is, are companies required to provide a sustainability report? Was that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's also important to clarify that we are dealing with different countries, different regions with different requirements. In some countries, it is required for large companies, and in other countries, that's not the case. It's more on a voluntary basis. But as Tom was saying, more and more companies are putting out those reports, even if it's not required in their local jurisdiction, because that's also a way to attract more customers, more investors. And so more and more companies are actually putting out those reports, though it might not be required legally in all those jurisdictions.
All right. One of the last questions, I only own mutual funds and ETFs. Can I vote proxies for the companies the funds hold?
If you own mutual funds and ETFs and not stocks directly, no, you cannot vote your shares. Your asset manager does that on your behalf. But you can ask your asset managers how they vote your shares, and you can tell them if you disagree with the way that they do it. I know that in the past, lots of asset managers did not even exercise that right. So the answer is no, you cannot, but you can review how your asset manager votes shares in the mutual funds and ETFs that you own.
All right, we have one last question. I think we have time. How can individual investors access ESG performance, especially regarding CO2 emissions, beyond basic ratings? Are there specific metrics or tools for deeper analysis to ensure investments truly reduce carbon footprint and address climate change? Tom, how about you? Want to go for it?
Yeah, I think we might maybe comment on what is on the platform on this side, because I can comment maybe only on what we have on our side. So we have some internal tools whereby we can see different type of metrics. So when you invest in a fund, basically you will have this analysis that is already done. But I think publicly there is some different metrics and rating that disclose this. Maybe Ida, if you want to add on what you have on the platform, or
no, we do not have such metrics available on Saxo's platform as of yet. But again, if you are looking for this type of information, I think a good source of information is definitely a company's sustainability report.
And maybe to complement this, thanks Ida. We also display some information in our own reporting fact sheets, whereby you can find the ESG rating of the funds compared to his benchmark, and also the carbon emissions of the funds if you take the net zero strategy versus his benchmark. So yeah, that's the information that we display on our side.
All right. I think one last question. Someone has asked, during the platform walkthrough, you showed something called Morningstar rating. What is that? Can you explain that to those people who just don't know?
I guess I
Ida,
can
you wanna go?
start, and maybe
Okay.
Tom, if you want to add something to
Yeah,
that.
okay.
The Morningstar rating is a rating provided by Morningstar, which looks at a fund's risk-adjusted return over time. It's a way to compare a fund against its peers.
Yeah, and so they will look at the different like funds, the different like holdings that we have, and based on that, as I said, as Ida mentioned, we rate the risk-adjusted return and also rate the ESG part by having their own methodology and score on the Morningstar platform. You just bear in mind that each providers and like Morningstar have their own ESG rating and own methodology, and that's why we have decided at Amundi to leverage on these 15 providers to have a better picture of it.
Awesome. Another question, because we still have 4 minutes left. The ratings you use on the platform are from Sustainalytics, but isn't it true that this rating might differ from another provider? And if so, which one is right? Fair question. Ida, you want to take it?
Which one is right? That's a
Yeah.
tough one.
Yeah.
The answer is yes. We use Sustainalytics, but there's tons of providers out there with different methodologies. And so, of course, their ratings do vary from time to time. There was actually a study from MIT a few years ago that showed that the correlation between ESG risk ratings was between 0.4 and 0.7. That's a significant difference. In comparison, for credit rating agencies, the correlation is 0.99, which is almost 1 and identical. So yes, those ratings are different. Which one is the right one? That's a difficult question to answer. What I can say is that when we went out searching for a provider, we did do a thorough due diligence of a number of providers, and then we selected Sustainalytics on the basis of their methodology that we thought was quite strong.
Fantastic. All right, I think that's it for today. Ida or Tom, do you have anything else you'd like to leave our attendees with?
The transition, we'll just add maybe on transition and ESG in general. You need to really bear in mind that it's a long-term trend that we have to invest in, make sure company commits, and also by having a very clear objective for the future.
Ida? All right, so then if you can scan this with your phone, then you get to take a survey for Saxo so we can improve our webinars. And we'd really love it if you took a few minutes of your day to do that. Ida, do you have anything else to add, or should we let people enjoy the rest of their day?
Nothing to add. No,
okay.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Melody.